Na uno e ho'olauna i ke kanaka no ke iela e hai lelo aku ia o ko e pili ana ke kahi papahana nui. O ia kuhoa, nunui na hana hana pu ai no maua mamua aku. Ka holo moana i ka wa akaulua i hele i na moku kupuna. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our key speaker for this morning. He's a well-known practitioner. He's a chanter under Kumu La'akapu Lenchenko. He is also a member of Kahale Mua Kuali'i. He is a mo'olono, one of the mo'olono orders, very integral in our makahiki ceremonies and games. He's done a lot of work research-wise on aina, wahikapu, land management, but most of all, for these past maybe 5 to 10 years, has done substantial work on the Mokukupuna, the ancestral lands in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, part of the Papahanau Mokunuia Kea Reserve. So today, he'll be sharing his work about Kane, Kuleana, and Mana, and the reason why it's important for us to collectively gather in these kind of spaces as Kane, you know, to elevate the mana for ourselves today. No laila ina hoa, ina hiki ke pai kalima, no ku hoa. Please give a round of applause and hand and welcome to our keynote speaker, Kekuewa, Kikiloi.
Give him that. Give him that.
O ka ola ia e te atua, e nāna mai kau mau pula pula, e ola ka niko o a palalau hala kolo pupu a hau mā ka iole. A laila, e lawe aku ia mako i ke alo wa ke. Au heo ko e na Hawaii. Ke koko ku koko, ka iwi o ku iwi, ka iewe o ku iewe, mai ka mole ho o kahi mai. Aloha mai kākou. Today I'll be talking about the topic of mana. I don't think I have my PowerPoint up, and so we're just going to roll with it right now. I guess a little bit about myself. My name is Kekuewa. I come from He'eia. I come from this area. I grew up over here. I guess for the past maybe 17, 18 years, I've been on a journey since I graduated from high school. A journey to understand myself, to understand my relation to all of you, to understand how we are one family. My background is in Hawaiian studies. After I graduated from Kamehameha schools in '93, I went to UH, and I would say, you know, like most people, I never really grew up with a Hawaiian background. I mean, there's things about us that is Hawaiian, that is our mannerisms and our sensibilities, but I didn't have any really deep culture about, you know, our history or our past or how we're connected or really what even happened to us. And so when I went to UH, you know, a lot of these things was kind of stirring in my head because, you know, you go to Kamehameha and you're proud to be Hawaiian, but you don't really know the depth of that pride, yeah? So when you're at the university, you're kind of walking around and get all these other people now, and you're trying to figure out who you are in relation to who they are. So I was in Hawaiian studies, Hawaiian language, and I got more interested into archaeology. One of the things that really upset me when I was younger was the building of the H3 that you see, running around the mountain. And that was something I think that kind of woke me up a little bit, because if there's one thing you identify when you come from Ko'olaupoko, it's the pali, it's the mountain, because that's something that is probably the most prominent feature that you see every single day. Since that time, I guess I'm more known as a researcher now. I like to look into the past, understand the past, but not just for the sake of understanding the past, but to see how it can be relevant today to the future and the present. I guess I called this presentation Building Mana, Unlocking Our Generational Power. It's about the empowerment and empowerment through our ancestors. When I was asked to be the keynote, Keola guys was saying, they wanted me to talk on the topic of Hawaiian spirituality. And it was something I think I'm still a little bit uncomfortable with, because I myself am still growing and still trying to understand and learn. But there's things about the research I think I found that I try to apply to my own life today, that I guess I'll share with you kind of my journey and different pathways of things that I think is important for us as Kane Hawaii to really embrace, and to move forward. As you all know, I mean, our history is a troubled one, in the historical period. It's a history of struggle. It's a history of loss. And so when we talk about, what happened to us as a people, you can talk about the overthrow. You can talk about the loss of language. You can talk about the loss of land. There's a lot of struggles that we've been through. And sometimes we don't really understand how we were connected to that and what we were before and what we can be again. So at least in my family, the first slide would have been of my grandfather. I get my Hawaiian through him. I'm also Japanese and Chinese. And I think growing up, I didn't really have a sense of Hawaiian identity or a strong one. And the first thing that I did when I was trying to find out more about my Hawaiian identity was to look to my grandfather. He had passed away when I was 12 years old, but he was my link to the past, and I lost that link when he passed away. So I embarked on a journey of genealogy, really. And so I'll touch on three things today that kind of helped me in this transformation. The first is going to be on genealogy. The second is going to be on land. And the third is going to be on chant and ceremony. And I see those three things as kind of the pillars of my world that has helped with this transformation inside of me. So back to my grandfather, he's from Hilo. He was born in the early 1900s. Is the slide up? Is the slide up right now? Or not yet? You can switch to the next slide if it's there, or the next two slides. Oh, actually, that keys me in on something. The first thing I want to talk about before I go into the story is these two concepts that I think is pretty critical to Hawaiian spirituality. The first is mana. It's something that I think that separated us from everybody else. Our mana was more than this loosely translated definition of supernatural power or something synonymous with power and authority. I think oftentimes we see mana as something that is static, like it's something that we just accrue over a lifetime and it's just about us. But the way I've been starting to think about mana is something that reoccurs. It constantly builds. It's a process that can keep climbing, or it can diminish if you let it go. And this happens across time, not just in your lifetime, but the lifetime of your fathers, your grandfathers, your forefathers, because these are the things that they do, and you're building the legacy of these people. The other thing about mana that people need to understand is that it can be concentrated in places. It is concentrated by the reoccurring of particular historical events on the same spot over and over again. Our kupuna knew this, and that's why you see certain things that manifest, in our culture where, for instance, like sites like Heiau, Heiau always stayed on the same spot. It was rebuilt and rededicated over and over and over again. In the period of the historical period when there was the halepule or the churches that were being built, they built it on the heiau. They built sacred sites on the sacred sites because they were important locations of mana. And so those are things that I've been thinking about more and more, as I've been doing this research, and I'll kind of show how it is interwoven into those three concepts of genealogy, land, and rituals and ceremonies. The second concept, I think that is important, is the ʻaha. Yeah, we're at a ʻaha right now. The ʻaha refers to a senet or a braided cord. And this thing was a metaphor, probably the most powerful metaphor of our people, because it represented our ability to come together and weave like a braid, something that became stronger and stronger the more weaves we put into it. And leadership was determined by your ability to hold the ʻaha. So ʻaha wasn't just about us coming together, but it was about birthing leaders. And that was important because it gave us social structure. Yeah? Right now, one of the problems I see with colonization is that there's no social structure in our community. Yeah? They take away these things that help us to understand how power and how knowledge and authority is legitimized. So oftentimes it's confusing in our community. Who is the leaders? Who knows stuff? Who do we follow? Where is the hierarchy? Where is the mana? Yeah, we're looking for that. Yeah, and so the ʻaha helps to restore this balance again, because you go through a process of becoming. Yeah. One of the things about ʻaha that is important is that it was a very arduous and difficult ceremony that the chiefs used to go through in order to gain confirmation from the ancestors for the right to rule. But at a very smaller level, we all go through ʻahas in our lifetime. It is a genealogical cord to our ancestors. It's our connection. And, throughout our life, we're challenged with certain things. And the more difficult the challenge, the more rewarding the outcome is. And so my life has been difficult, and I'll talk about some of the challenges I've gone through with my research and my personal life. And I'm sure a lot of you have gone through similar things. So back to my grandfather, he was from Hilo. He grew up over there, and like most of our families, probably our grandfather's generations was like the last generations that was holding on to the old ways. Yeah? They were native speakers. They were practitioners of different arts. They were farmers. They were fishermen. They knew aspects of spirituality and were practicing these things still. And then we have more of our parents' generation, where I call the statehood generation. And a lot of our parents, they were up against a very difficult time when it was not cool to be Hawaiian. There was a lot of stigmatized notions that Hawaiians are stupid, we're lazy, we're not motivated people, yeah. And so those are things that planted the seed of self-hate in our community. It's only now, our generation, that we're starting to kind of shake these ideas off and realizing that that's nonsense. We were people of mana, we were people of power, yeah. And so my journey to understand who I was as a Hawaiian and my connection to all of you started with my grandfather. And so this is a picture of my grandfather. I think he's in Hilo right now. He loved to play ukulele, but he's with a guitar right now. Throughout his life, he was a fisherman. He worked on the boats, and then as an aku fisherman, and then later on he worked on some of the larger ships as a ship mechanic. And the story of his life is a reoccurrence because it becomes like the story of my life, which I'll share today. You can go to the next slide. This next picture is a picture of our family from Honolulu. It's the family of my grandfather in 1924. There's a picture of my great-grandfather in here, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-great-grandmother in here. And like most families, if you go back in time before our grandfather's and great and grandmother's generation, the plantation system was in line. So there was a lot of movement of people that was going on throughout the archipelago, and people from rural areas was moving to these centers of plantation work. And so this is a plantation photo of my family. And I have a heading, mai ka mole ho'okahi mai, from the single taproot. We have people from my family here today, like Kahale over there. We're all descendants from the people in this picture over here. And like many of you, you have pictures in your family like this where you all come from one taproot. And from this taproot, we come from a larger taproot where we're all connected. And when I was in Hawaiian studies, I started to realize, wow, bro, our genealogy is nuts, bro, in Hawaii. Because, it's not like we just came on the boat yesterday. We was here for a long time. generations upon generations upon generations. And this is not something to take lightly. Yeah? This is a powerful thing that we need to tap into and remember, that we have generations of ancestors, and we all need to kind of look towards our past to understand how we're all related, because we come from the single taproot, one taproot. We all one family. Yeah. So it started to make more sense to me, about the importance of genealogy, and how every person is a part of this chain of continuity. You can go to the next slide. So next one too. So I have a slide, kind of showing like how there's genealogy and status and social order in our community. If you look at the genealogy slide on the left, you have a primary ancestor from which we all descend, Papa and Mākua, yeah? Haloa, yeah? Different people at that point of history that became the main taproot from which we all descended from. And each person is descended from another descendant, from another descendant, from another descendant in an unbroken link of genealogy. So we carry the same DNA as the people of our ancestors. Yeah, we are our ancestors. And the way spirituality worked in the past was that we honored our ancestors, we honored our forefathers. Yeah? So if you look at the next chart of status and rank, as you got older and you moved up this continuum of time in both life and afterlife, you're continually honored, and you gain mana, because your descendants is constantly giving you more mana. And that mana in return comes back down to you as the descendant through the chain. And so this is a closed system, yeah? This does not include outsiders. This is a family system that only involves all of us. So oftentimes when people try to delegitimize or brush away concepts of genealogy, yeah, that's lose money, because our mana is generated from genealogy. Yeah, it's a closed family system. You give mana to your ancestors, you give mana back. Yeah, and so that's an important aspect of Hawaiian spirituality that we have to remember. Our ancestors are probably our greatest strength that we have. They have the models of how we live well. They have the models of how we gain mana and power, and they are our strength. One of the next things I want to talk about is land. I think for me, land was a really important concept. Yeah? We have this homeland, Hawaii, that is a nation. We're a nation state. We're one of the most powerful nation states in the Pacific for sure, and we're in the family of nations. And a lot of the good work that Keanu Sai is doing today is kind of bringing forth this new understanding of who we were as a government, as a nation of people. But even prior to the nation of people, we're a race of people. We're a chiefdom, yeah? We're a set of competing chiefdoms that was powerful. And for me, land has always been important because it really shapes who you are. Yeah? Each one of us, we can kind of relate back to our childhood of where we grew up. Yeah? Fond memories of that place and how it shaped and molded who we were and who we are today. One of the things that was really important, I think, to my understanding of Aina in a Hawaiian kind of perspective was just understanding the vastness of Hawaii. Yeah? Oftentimes you hear Keiki today saying that, oh, we live on one rock. Oh, this is more than one rock. This is the biggest rock in the Pacific, you know what I mean? And a series of huge rocks that was the home of our ancestors. In the past 10 years, I worked in resource management, and I just find myself fortunate enough to have been able to go to a lot of places in that short, maybe 10 years or so. So the first places that I went, maybe starting in 2002, was on a boat, and I was able to go to the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. And it really opened my eyes to the vastness of our archipelago. Yeah? We're not some tiny little isolated archipelago in the middle of the Pacific. If you were to superimpose this map over the continental United States, we stretch 1/3 of the United States in our homeland. Yeah? We're not small, we're big. The other thing that kind of opened up my eyes was working for Kamehameha schools, because Princess Pauahi got about 1/10 of the chief lands, yeah? And during that time there, I was in charge of taking care of some of the sacred sites, pretty much, the cultural sites for Pauahi. And during that time, we were going outer island to get to know the places, some 59 ahupua'a across 5 islands. It was during that time I got to see a lot of different communities, what people were doing to try to restore the land and to restore their communities. But most of my research has primarily been focused on the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. If you can imagine, if you were to go on a boat up there, it would take you about 2 weeks to go all the way to the very last island, yeah? And so that first trip in 2002 was an eye-opening experience because I wasn't really a water person, yeah? In fact, I'd never been on a boat in my life up until that point, and I didn't even know if I would get seasick. And so there was a little bit of a worry inside of me, to get kind of put on this trip. I knew it was a great opportunity, but I was a little worried because I just haven't been on open ocean for a month at a time. Yeah. And so I went up there. I went up with Alehu and a whole bunch of other Hawaiians, and I think it was the first time people were trying to understand this from a cultural perspective. Yeah. And so that experience of going up there was important because I got to see every island in the chain. Yeah, and I think there's important patterns in the archipelago that happen that we don't always get to see, because most of us don't get to go up there. And so when I came back, I was fully inspired, reborn. I was telling my friends and my family what I experienced, and I was just like, I wanted to be an ambassador of this message that, there's 10 more islands in the Hawaiian archipelago that nobody really told us about, and our archipelago is vast. And, what was interesting was when I came back, I talked to my grandmother, and then at the time she was telling me, oh yeah, your grandfather used to go up there, He was on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife ships, and he went up there. And so this story was coming full circle, yeah, where, I was really following in my grandfather's past unknowingly, and I think if you don't do your genealogy, and if you don't understand where your ancestors have been in the past, what land areas, you're not going to be able to identify those patterns. You're not going to know that your grandfather went there, or your great-grandfather went there, or your forefathers went there. And so you don't know how you fit in the continuum. But if you do these types of research and you're seeking out this knowledge, you start to see that some things are not coincidence. There's reoccurring things that's happening that is that really, the only way you can start to explain it is to adopt a sense of faith, yeah? That this is like a process that is happening way above you, and you're just kind of just following in the footsteps. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of power, I got 2 slides over here. I have Mauna Kea on the right. That's on the east side of the archipelago. And I have an island called Midway, or what we're calling Kuahelani today, as the ancient name. And you can't even see the island. All you see is like a reflection in the clouds. And our ancestors, they were powerful voyagers. They was going up there real early, when they came to these islands. And they developed a system of spiritual belief based on patterns that they saw in the archipelago, So in the west are these deified islands. They're islands of our kupuna. They seem small, but they're the most powerful islands because they're the islands that the spirits of our ancestors are going on into their journey into the afterlife in the west, And so these islands, they take on supernatural characteristics, When we were over there, we were at sunrise, we were watching, and there was these mirages that were popping up that looked like islands. And this was Kanehunamoku that our kupuna were writing about in the 1800s. They say that Kanehunamoku is an island that appears and reappears at will because Kane makes it appear. And it's the island where, our ancestors go to travel to the afterlife. We saw this island when we was up there. The thing was there. And in fact, people thought it was a real island, and people was talking about it throughout the day. Oh, you saw the islands out on the, off the ship at the horizon. And I had to laugh because the islands are not that close together. You cannot see them from one island to the next. It was a mirage, And so these things are real. Our ancestors, they never make this stuff up. The other picture over here is the island floating in the cloud. It's Kuahelani, Holani, Nu'umealani, where mythical lands of our ancestors that were said to float in the clouds. And when you go up there, you see the reflection of the lagoons of the atoll shining in the sky on the clouds. And it looks like an island floating in the sky. Yeah, so when they saw that, they saw status and rank, yeah. They saw mana, yeah, of our ancestors. Like this was like not even one island already. This was like supernatural kind of stuff where their spirits was going and where they was all, being deified into Mākua, ʻAkua, yeah, moving up levels, yeah, in the continuum. And so when you look at the main Hawaiian Islands, this is places where we live, yeah. This is the places of the people, the descendants. This is the places of chiefs, yeah. So when you talk about Mauna Kea, you're talking about the broad backs of the chief, yeah, representing the ali'i lineages of, Moku o Keawe, Maui a Kama, yeah, Kakuhihewa for Oahu, yeah, Mano Kalani Po for Kauai, yeah. They have different epithets that are given for different chiefs throughout time that are well known for these islands, yeah, that were the best of the lineages, the leaders, yeah. And so these are, this is a very sophisticated kind of system that they were developing, about how status and mana played out in the archipelago from east to west and how it interplayed in our genealogy in life and afterlife, yeah. So spirituality was important to them because they wanted to maintain these connections. Next slide. One of the most important islands in the archipelago is this island that sits right in the middle. And our ancestors knew that it sat in the middle of these two realms, yeah, Ao and Po. Yeah? So you have afterlife and life. And it was an important transitional point between these two realms. It was called Moku Mana Mana. Yeah? So if you can look at the root word Mana Mana, it means worship. It means the rays of the sun. Yeah? It means the hand. Yeah, and all these concepts came together in these rituals that they would do in what was called the ʻAha. Yeah? And some of the research that I've been finding is that the ʻAha was a ceremony that happened throughout the archipelago in a ritual cycle. It happened at a certain time of the year, and it happened in a certain sequence of the year. So it wasn't important just to have the ʻAha. A bunch of guys come together, the chiefs tell the people, oh, we're going to have the ʻAha right now. They had to time the ʻAha in a sequence. And that's very difficult when you're talking about integration of an entire race of people across five islands on an archipelago. But there's a system of timing that happened, yeah? And this timing culminated at Moku Mana Mana at the most important day of the year, which is the summer solstice. That's when the sun is highest in the sky. That's when mana is maximized because your shadows or your spirits that travel outside of your body, they say kaukalai kalolo, yeah, the sun stands directly over your manava overhead, and then your shadows come in and you're maximized in power, yeah. So this ritual happened most importantly at Moku Mana Mana, and what we're finding is that different chiefly groups were working together to come up here to build this island temple. So this is a pretty nuts concept because if you can understand, like, you get like on Maui, you get pi'ilani hale, yeah? There's a huge heiau, bro, like football fields or whatever, huge amount of rocks, yeah? Difficult to build, bro. A lot of guys had to build that thing. But if you can imagine, Moku Mana Mana was 500 miles away from Kauai, if not, some 1,000 miles away, round trip from Hawaii Island. And people was going up there for build one temple in the middle of the ocean. This is the type of conviction that our ancestors had, yeah? They never just backed down when there was something difficult. And in fact, the ʻAha was the biggest challenge, yeah? So the more difficult the ʻAha, the more rewarding the return. So they would try the hardest stuff, and they would strive for the most difficult things, because if they were to attain it, then the ancestors would give them the most awesome blessings. Yeah? So my experiences on this island, kind of grew over time. I've been doing field work up there, trying to map the sites, trying to document what was going on, looking at the stories and the oral traditions. And probably the most important experience I had was in 2009 or so, where, for school, we got to do field work. They basically say you got to, do a certain amount of work for your degree. And so in order for me to go up there, the ships don't go up there very often, so they had to basically drop me off, and I had to live on the island for some period of time. And it's a small island, yeah, and it's a powerful island. And I got a little bit intimidated. I think most people would, because we think, oh yeah, living on an island, no problem. But when you see the ship go away, it's a whole different story, bro. When you're there with only one other person, yeah. You look at the ship and it's just a dot on the horizon, and you look around all around you, And there's no way to get off, bro. This is your home till somebody comes to pick you up. And if something happens to the ship, then it could be a while that you're there. There's no water on the island, or very little water, so we had to haul all our water in for a month's time. We had to bring in our own food, all our provisions, and it was difficult because we had to carry it up this kind of 200-foot face that is very kind of precarious. Yeah? It's not like you just have like a straight shot up to the top. You got to kind of climb the rocks. If you can imagine like Mākua, you're trying to climb the cliffs with all these buckets and stuff like that, and you don't want to fall off. That's kind of what we experienced when we went there. And it was during that time that, I had a lot of revelations about the importance of cycles and reoccurrence, because up until that point, like, I would say I'm a nature guy. I go out to nature, but for the most part of the day, we're in a building. We're cut off from nature. We're not in nature, you know what I mean? So when you're in nature and there's no shelter, it's a whole nother experience. Try to go live outside for 30 days in a row with no shelter. You start to realize things, because all of a sudden your focus is not on all this other kind of stuff. Oh, I gotta check my Facebook, I gotta check email, I gotta go talk to so-and-so. All that stuff is out the door, bro. It's all about survival, at that point. And when you're outside in nature, you start to look at nature. You start to see the intricacies of what's going on. So, you see how many birds is around you. I memorized all the chicks that was around me. I noticed when one was missing. I noticed behaviors in animals that made me realize that, I can see why our ancestors thought that, our ancestors was deified in these different natural processes. Yeah? I watched the clouds. Yeah? I woke up every day to the rising of the sunset, and I went to sleep every day with the setting of the sun. That's something that I never did that many days in a row before. Yeah? I mean, you don't really have a choice, because once it comes up, everything else is going on this cycle. Once the sun comes up, every living thing is waking up. And you gotta wake up with it. You cannot turn off your light, go close the windows, and then go back to sleep. You gotta wake up too. And when the sun goes down, you gotta go sleep, because there's nothing else to do. You cannot see nothing, And so that cycle started to get inside of me, and I started to realize like I was in like one rhythm. I was like in tune with everything around me. And when I came back, again, it breaks the rhythm again, yeah, and you're not in the flow again, yeah. So the importance of cycles and reoccurrence is an important thing, yeah. It's innate with us. It's our biology, yeah. And so when we do things of our ancestors, we're reigniting this reoccurrence, yeah, this cycle over and over again. And that's really what keeps our society and our culture together. Otherwise, if we're not doing the things over and over again to keep some kind of sense of consensus and unity, we start to go all kinds of different ways, and we're not united as a family anymore, yeah? So reoccurrence is an important thing. Next slide. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is kind of rituals, yeah, and ceremonies. I didn't really have a good picture, because every time we do ceremonies, you're not supposed to take picture, yeah? So this is a picture of me chanting at the Kamehameha Day opening. So I wanted to show that, my background in chanting, and that's been a real important thing, I think. I think, there's an apprehension, yeah, in our community to kind of embrace these arts of spirituality. It's kind of like, we were talking about in the Mo'olono section, the other day about how some of the ʻŌpio, like they're scared for put on the malo, yeah. I mean, there's an apprehension, because it's not something we're familiar with in our lifetime, at least. So when we see it, it's like, oh, I might be shame, yeah. Same thing I noticed with chanting. A lot of people, they don't like be shame, yeah, because you gotta really, it's a singular event. You gotta put your voice out there. You're all out there, bro. You're naked, when you're chanting, and you're putting yourself all out there, yeah. And it's a really, it's an open experience, yeah. And so, like everybody else, I was kind of hila at first, yeah. When in Hawaiian studies, they make you do chants. You gotta go up and say, oh, bro, I don't know if I can do this kind of stuff, But the more I realized that, it was a tool, yeah, for us to reconnect with our ancestors, I started to kind of go into chant. My first kumu was on John Keola Lake, and I only took like two classes with him, but I think it was some of the most important classes, because the first thing you gotta do is kind of find your voice, yeah. You gotta get comfortable with who you are and how your leo is, yeah. And once you do that, you kind of find that ancestral voice inside of you. And when you're chanting, it's not really even you chanting already, but it's like all your ancestors coming out of you and just powering through, yeah, when you're chanting. So it can be, you know, a powerful experience. I also learned from Kamana Opono, you know, and I think some of the important lessons I learned from him is function, bro. What is it? What is the chant for? How are you going to apply it? How is it used? You know, what is the end goal? What you trying to get out of it, you know? And then more recently, I learned under Tony La'akapu Lenchenko. And then some of the things I learned from him was technique, tonal quality, all the different intricacies of, like, if you want to achieve function, you got to know all the techniques to maximize you to get to that function. Because, you know, there's a lot of different chant styles and techniques, and you want to apply the correct ones in the correct ways. Another thing I learned from him was, like, a passion for chanting that was like intense, bro. Like our chant practices would go on for, like, the longest one was, I think, 4 or 5 hours straight. My voice was all trashed after, you know, but it was an exhilaration, yeah, of learning. And then he would throw me into these scenarios where I gotta go do the chant, you know, like the last ʻAha Kane, we did the opening over here, we did the Kamehameha Day competition, and I'm not really into the whole pageantry thing, and I want to try and apply this stuff in a functional way that connects us to our ancestors, yeah, and trying to help, you know, groups like the Hale Mua, you know, we do rituals and ceremonies and stuff. But it was an important experience because it made me realize, you know, how, you know, you really need to grasp it and hold it on for yourself. You know, when I went out for the competition, I could hear a pin drop, right? There's so much people in the crowd, man. I was like, the second year wasn't too bad because I wasn't as nervous, but, you know, when I went out, I was just kind of, it's just you, man. It's just you. But it's the same way when you're chanting, yeah, to your ancestors. It's just you and them, man. You got to focus. So ritual has been an important thing. Ceremony and chant has been an important thing. In the Hale Mua, you know, we've been doing things like trying to reignite the makahiki ritual cycles and then the ʻaha ceremonies also, yeah. And that, I think, has been an important part of rebuilding our lahui, yeah. These things are things that reoccur over and over again every year. And from you know, time immemorial, they were doing these ritual cycles. And so we need to reestablish these things, yeah, because it forces us all to work together as one family from one genealogy, yeah, that's tied to one homeland. You know, these things reinforce our values, yeah. It builds consensus in our community. It shows mana, yeah. And so these are things that I've been kind of keenly aware of, and things that I want to try and encourage all of us to kind of go on this path. So I don't know what the time is right now. I think we have about 10 more minutes, but I might cut this a little short because I'm running out of things to say. But I guess to kind of summarize, yeah, 3 things, yeah, genealogy, land, and ceremony. Our connection to genealogy is important because we are in a continuum. Yeah? We always have to remember that. We are interconnected with our ancestors no matter what we do, whether we like it or not. That's our ancestors, and that's the cord that ties us no matter what. And so we have to malama that cord. We have to nurture that cord. We have to braid the cord stronger. Yeah? We have to be mindful of the future generations, not just us. You know, we're in the middle of the continuum, but our ʻŌpio, that's the next generation. We have to make sure that the cord continues. Yeah? There's power in doing things over and over again, and these are models that we can draw upon that become relevant for today. I think one of the most important points from the genealogy section that I want to emphasize too is that this is a closed system. Yeah. I think today, you know, we're so used to people telling us that, oh, you're not Hawaiian enough, yeah? That's the first thing people tell us, bro. It pissed me off, yeah? It's like, you're not Hawaiian enough because what's the first thing they ask you? Oh, how much Hawaiian are you? Bro, they don't ask me how much Japanese am I or how much Chinese am I, but every time they ask me Hawaiian, how much Hawaiian are you? And you know, my response, it's hard for me to respond because I'm usually pu'iwa, yeah? So I say, I don't know how I can fractionate my identity because this is just who I am. And the genealogical link that I have You cannot break that no matter what you say, bro. So I don't really care to even answer that kind of questions. You know what I mean? So I think we need to kind of shift our focus from things like blood quantum that tries to divide us to genealogy that tries to unite us. Yeah? That's our ancestry, that's our strength and our mana. The other thing about the closed system is that, that this communication process and this connection we have to land, it's strongest amongst Hawaiians in our homeland. The whole Ailona we see is our ancestors communicating to us, yeah? I mean, we are tied to them at the cord. And one of the things that has troubled me more and more is that I think there's more and more non-Hawaiians that are starting to take parts of our culture and appropriate it to themselves, yeah? And then so we see that in hula. Probably that's the best example, yeah? Hula, where there's so many Japanese now that's dancing hula. Some Japanese say that they dance hula better than us now. So how backwards is this whole thing? Yeah? This is our culture, yeah? But now people are doing this stuff better than us. They're trying to take stuff that's part of our flow of traditions and trying to make them part of their flow of tradition. It's a strange thing because they're trying to break the continuity, yeah? My point is that they cannot break the continuity because no matter how good you dance hula, the ancestral connection that you have cannot be broken. That is the key ingredient that makes us different. They cannot generate the same mana that we have because they don't have the genealogical link. They don't have the connection to ancestors. They don't have the flow coming down and the flow going up. That's not something you can just fabricate or learn, today. It's something that is inherited. It's our legacy, So those are things that we have to be mindful of, and I think we need to recenter our perspectives around genealogy, around homeland, around communication with our ancestors, because that's really the trump card that we have that no one can break, and that's the source of our mana. So I guess in conclusion, I just wanted to mahalo the committee of the ʻAha Planning Committee for inviting me today to talk. I hope some of the things that I was saying was relevant and useful. Sometimes it's hard to kind of put this stuff together when there's so many things going on, and I just appreciate the time to come talk to you guys. So mahalo, ia ʻo pakahi.